Well, the hotspot list of countries will be reviewed regularly, but is it going to be a fine balancing act of allowing people in and out of the country safely and rebooting the battered tourism industry? Home Affairs Minister Dr. Motsoaledi joins us now, and this, of course, is also with regard to some of the developments in terms of level 1 COVID-19 regulations. Minister Motsoaledi, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. One of the things, of course, that many people have been expressing is that as a result of the slowdown in general in economic activity, there's also been a delay when it comes to accessing services at Home Affairs. Give us a sense of which services are fully operational and which ones are not yet back online.
Yes, good evening, Kathy, and thank you very much for having me. Good evening to the viewers and listeners out there. Well, indeed, the regulations were released yesterday, Kathy, show that the services that were curtailed in Home Affairs have now been restarted. You'll remember that when the lockdown started in the beginning, we were offering very, very few services. We kept on increasing the services bit by bit. Now we're offering all the civic services. Civic services means ID, passports, birth certificate, marriage certificate, etc. Now they are being offered, all of them. Then on the immigration front, as you know, it is the opening of the borders, whereby we're fully opened 18 of the borders, which were partially opened. But 35 of the borders who were totally closed from the beginning of the lockdown remain closed until further notice.
What is your biggest concerns when it comes to reopening the borders? And I would imagine, you know, the disruption to some of the applications that people would have, whether it's for travel visas, whether it's for permits to be in the country, those have been disrupted. So what are your biggest concerns in terms of ensuring that people are traveling with the right documentation?
Well, this is going to be a nightmare. You are aware that the opening of borders is not just a blank check. There have been conditions which were mentioned by both the President and Minister Dlamini Zuma when she issued the overall regulations on the 17th of September, that certain requirements are needed in terms of COVID protocol. So the administration of that, of course, is going to be a nightmare. But remember, we have got no option, because here we are trying to strike a balancing act between lives and livelihoods. And I can tell you it's a very delicate balancing act. So it gives us nightmares. This morning, one moment you hear your counterpart ministers in the neighboring countries phoning and complaining, you solve it. 2 hours later, they said the problem has restarted again, because it also depends on the understanding of our officials. Many of them are finding it difficult to understand the regulations as they go. So they start by making mistakes, and of course, it makes travelers complain.
And what kind of problems have they been calling about your counterparts in other countries?
For instance, you are aware that ever since the beginning of the lockdown, we've been allowing drivers to move across borders, drivers carrying cargo and other commercial goods, and also essential services. They were being allowed. Now that is COVID level 1, some of the officials changed the conditions under which the truckers were going through the borders, and change them and make new conditions, believing that is a new era altogether, when actually that is not necessary. The truckers have been following a particular route for 6 months now, just to change it now because we are at log level 1. Of course, that's caused confusion, and it can cause the piling up of trucks at the borders. These are some of the problems that we experienced this morning.
Let's talk about travel from other countries. We know that South Africa has, of course, a very reduced list of people that can travel to the country. What is informing that list? Because the measures that are in place, which say that everybody needs to have a COVID negative test, and if they don't have that, they have to go under quarantine. Those look like they would be sufficient enough to deal with anybody who may be carrying the virus.
Well, not necessarily, Kathy. you will be aware that the National Command Council decided that we are going to have two sets of countries in resolving this issue. As I'm telling you, it's a very clear balancing act. We said there will be two sets of countries. The first set are all African countries. We are not troubling them at all when it comes to who must come here. The second set are high risk countries because we are following a risk-adjusted approach. Now, the high-risk countries, we are not allowing everybody to come there like African countries. We are allowing certain categories of people. We are not allowing leisure travel specifically. We are allowing people who are coming here for business, people who are coming here for investment purposes, people who are coming here bringing particular skills, people who are on international duty in sporting, culture, arts and cultural activities. Those are specific groups of people and they have to apply. The reason that we are doing so, we're just trying to decrease the volumes. You know, it's very difficult to control virus. So you always try to deal with a fewer number of people than dealing with whole populations of people because you don't know where this virus will escape. Remember that COVID, the fact that we are at level 1 does not mean COVID-19 pandemic is over. It's not over all over the world. We have seen countries that relaxed before. Now they've restarted again. Some of them, the infection rate is much more vicious than the first round, you know, than when they got it the first time. Because they said and relaxed and thought it's over. So we can't go to sleep. We've got to be vigilant and strike this balance between life and livelihoods. And I can assure you it's not a very easy one.
Of course, some of the people that have had a lot of difficulty accessing, again, your services minister, would be those who are in the country either applying for refugee status, applying for asylum status, and we've seen a number of advocacy groups try and raise that issue.
Well, Kathy, there are people, of course, who believe government is imposing difficulties on them. They forget that the virus is imposing conditions on us which are very difficult to control. It's the virus. It's not us. You are aware that Home Affairs closed certain services specifically because we're avoiding crowds. I'm sure you have gone to some of the Home Affairs offices and have seen the queues. So if you must observe social distancing, if you must sanitize, if you must make sure that people wear masks and people don't easily get infected, you can't allow those crowds that you used to see in Home Affairs. So we had to curtail some of the services. And we think we're right, Kathy, because the very first week or two after the disaster lockdown, we had to close our Vryheid office. And because a worker there tested positive. Now, the number of people who we had to follow at home, because when we opened the offices at that time, we said we are taking the addresses, the name addresses of everybody who visit the office in case we have to follow them if something happened. So we're able to follow them up and all of them were tested. And it's because there were fewer people in the office who could imagine if that office was working at full force, how many people were we going to have to follow up and test and all that. And it was the beginning of the pandemic where we have to grab everybody who is positive in order to stop them from spreading it. So it is the virus that is imposing hardships, it's not us. So the issue of immigration, if you close borders, why then do people think immigration will work normally? All over the world, immigration was not working normally because borders were closed.
Minister Motsoaledi is the Home Affairs Minister. Let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you for your time.